Well, I'm getting over a cold, so my voice isn't at 100%, so I gotta keep my answers short and pertinent. You may have noticed at the end of my ideal videos, I say, if you'd like to see more, leave me a comment saying which character you'd like me to cover next. Character in the singular. If more people stop posting lists, and more people start requesting one character at a time, which a lot of people do, but there are just as many who post big long lists, and I'd rather that not happen. If more people start requesting one character at a time, next time I have a Q&A, I'll answer the colored faces question. I'll give you this much for now. Why don't Birdie's, Annie's, and Clarabelle's faces match their liveries? The idea for Birdie was to have his face be colored like an inverted conventional grill, whereas Annie and Clarabelle's gray faces match their roofs. What I don't want is the face to be the same color as what it's attached to. So in that regard, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do with Harold or Bulstrode. What inspired you to create your ideal series? I was digging around in Photoshop and I was looking around and I was seeing just purism. I want to show people that there are other ways. See if I can get a momentum going. See if I can encourage more people to sort of run with the kite than just be stuck in one place. There was an element of sheer naked pessimism in there because I'm just thinking I'm a skint with ADD. I can't bring my stories to life effectively. How long have you been thinking up this AU? I couldn't pinpoint a specific date. Will you ever create stories set in your ideal Thomas universe? If I could, I wouldn't have created that series in the first place. Like, I've avoided trains because I don't like CGI. Train simulator, that is. But recently I've been dicking around in Photoshop, trying to tinker with ways to make screenshots from trains look less like a computer game. And from working on this series, it hit me what to do. A little bit of blurring in whatever the focus point is, and a lot of blurring the further back we go. So at this point I might get trains, and I won't be making videos. I've been experimenting with the BuzzBook format on DeviantArt, if you want to check that out. What's your favorite edit you've made so far? That would be Peter Sam. He turned out really good. What's your least favorite edit so far? Annie and Clarabelle. I struggled to find a decent screenshot of those Stroudley break coaches. I had to settle for this behind-the-scenes Drayton Manor one. Behind glass. How do you feel about people shitting on your takes? It was inevitable. Purism and hopeless nostalgia are rampant. One problem I didn't anticipate was narrow-mindedness. I first remember encountering a lot of that in my Ideal Toby video, in which I kind of offhandedly say that one of my guesses for one of the reasons Audrey ended up quitting writing the Railway series would not be like the main reason, but just a contributing factor. And I had people accusing me of saying that was the reason, the only reason. There was one guy who left a comment saying, talking about, I don't remember what, but one of the reasons. But I read the whole thing thinking he was going somewhere with that. Like at the end, I'm like, fuck, I wasted a lot of time there. You haven't told me anything I don't know. There are several reasons why Audrey quit, and I'm convinced one of them was realizing that he constantly trying to improve on himself was getting to be a pain in the ass. Because you never stop learning, you never stop gleaning inspiration and information. And so learning that colloquialism, skirts. By the way, I've never seen any evidence that they're called kilts, period. Fuck you. So I think upon learning that, if he did, and I'm convinced he did because it makes sense for Mavis to have turned out that way. I'm thinking it's just one of the things that really ate at him toward the end. One of the big reasons, I think this was one the novelist fucking wrote, was he thought he was scraping the bottom of the barrel when it came to story inspiration ideas. And when you do your own homework, you'll find he barely scratched the surface. There was evidently a lot of information he didn't have, and I'm convinced one of them was that side play colloquialism. Colloquialism, I can't say it with a cold. But the worst problems with narrow-minded people is my ideal Oliver being an LNER, and people are like, it's called the Little Western because it's run by Great Western engines. That is one of the reasons. It is also called that because it's on the west coast of Sodor. It has Western auto trains. There are three reasons. And when I brought up the auto coaches in my Ideal Annie and Clarabelle video, I had some retard accuse me of saying that was the reason. There are three fucking reasons. And if you stick around, you'll find I'm gonna add more. I finally got fed up with this one guy. Every subsequent video, he wouldn't stop posting these novels about why his solution for Oliver was great. Finally, I got fed up with him. Some people have accused you of making certain characters woke. You know, I can understand why it would look that way. Velma's gone from Jinkies to Jankies, and if you look at some more recent clue boxes, it's obvious who the victims are and who committed the murders. I think I've gone on record once saying that having diversity in your cast is not a bad idea, as long as you're not doing it just to be a dick. And if you're doing it just because it's all the vogue at the time, you're a dick. And it's just my bad luck, it's all the vogue at the moment. Will you cover any CGI characters? Yeah, a couple. Who are your favorite Thomas YouTubers? The one whose content I watch the most is The Unlucky Tug, but I wouldn't say he's my favorite. He just updates a lot. He's a great content creator, but the Americanisms really piss me off. Favorite fan video? Rolling Stock, or Mad Bomber, or whatever you want to call it. Does your Percy work on Thomas's branch line? Yep, he graduates from station pilot to main goods engine on Thomas's branch line. What whistles do your ideal engines have? I think I thought about putting their whistles in at some point, but I couldn't really think of where it would go without sort of being jarring, and at some point I just gave up. Here's a rough guide. Wouldn't Percy having Douglas's? It's Donald's. Wouldn't Percy having Donald's whistle be confusing when Percy's on the main line? Nope, he doesn't often go on the main line anyway. Only when whenever he's making the odd trip to Edward's branch line. I like to think some of the whistles that sound identical only sound identical to us, but to a steam engine, they can pick up on the differences in ways we can't. Will you cover more obscure characters like 98462 and 87546? That's the plan. Will you reveal who numbers 14 and 15 are? That's the plan. Do you think there are characters the fandom doesn't know how to write for? I think in general the fandom has the characters down, but they're lacking story inspiration. In that regard, we got a bunch of Andrew Brenners running around. Will you cover locations like Knapford and Tidmouth? Most likely. Will you ever talk about your take on the Sodor map and its railway networks? Most likely. Will Sir Top Matt's Railway on your other channel ever return? I've had to pull the plug on that show, for logistical reasons, mostly to do with recording and editing. I won't go into it now because my throat's going. Just to say, logistically, that part of the project got to be a big pain in the ass. It's not bad with my ideal, it's short and snappy enough, and I deliberately made it short and snappy because that's just my inclination, and shorter videos don't take as long to edit, but my story narrations on my other channel proved to be a little too taxing. Hence why I wanted to go to a sort of book format on DeviantArt if I decide I want to give up and go to CGI. I'm confident about my edits, so someone I've been talking to is saying if I go into it with that kind of mindset of just giving up, I'm not going to have any fun with it. And I like to think my primary overriding duty is to the stories I want to tell, and as long as that's the case, I think I can take the plunge and not have it be a grind. How does the numbering scheme in Sir Thomas Matt's Railway work? Well, I made Thomas number 1, and then I took the first drawing from the Railway series, and I number them in order from right to left. Are you planning any model videos not related to Rolly? Well, like a lot of people, I've hit a number of snags with model railway stuff. All these online retailers are slitting their wrists. Hatton's became part of Rails of Sheffield, but I have yet to try out their services. And Shapeways, the 3D printing service, I find is getting slower and slower. Another reason I'm considering making the move to CGI. I haven't given up on the hobby, but as far as storytelling goes, I want to try to work with a new medium. I've talked about like an hour-long watermill video for a while. I think I mentioned it in my previous Q&As. I think that might end up being a long-term project. Same with an adaptation of Thomas Goes Fishing that I've talked about previously. What do you expect for Thomas's 80th anniversary? I don't know, I'm expecting something to crop up this year. It seems like lately every even-numbered year something significant crops up. In 2020 we had the missing coach leaks, which inspired Rolly the Bachman coach. 2022 we had those season 5 Raws. So who knows, maybe something incredibly interesting will crop up this year. Later this year anyway. It's nearly halfway over though. But then again, I think the missing coach leaks came out in August of 2020, and the season 5 Raws came in July of that year, 2022. So who knows if these trends continue. Have you considered putting your edits on DeviantArt? I did, but I very quickly nixed the idea because I could write down my explanations in the description, but I know very, 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 very few people even look at the description on any platform. There is no guarantee whatsoever that people will read my descriptions. They'll just see my edits and immediately start shitting all over me. At least in video format, I can explain myself, and you have to sit through and listen to it and still shit on me. Will you ever talk about tugs in the show? I'd like to, but as far as commenting, requesting tug stuff, it's a case of try your luck. There are aspects of the show I'd like to talk about, but as far as characters go, there are very few I would alter visually. Just to name a few, Billy Shoepack and the Cranes. As far as Starfleet and Zed stacks, there's virtually nothing I do with them visually. So I don't have much to talk about there, but conceptually in many areas, and with various aspects of the production, potential reboot material, there's a lot I could talk about. I'm not sure where to start. Maybe I'll have to make one unprompted to sort of give people the right idea so that they can comment. Like maybe I'll end a Tugs video I talk about by saying, if you like hearing my point of view and seeing my edits, leave a comment saying which aspect of Tugs you'd like me to talk about next. Maybe I'll start my next run of my ideal with something Tugs related. Because the first two runs, I talked about Thomas and Douglas without the comments preamble. Maybe I'll do that this time. How can Thomas be built in the 50s when the Railway series started in the 40s? Who said anything about the Railway series? I'm talking about a top-to-bottom do-over. What's your favorite CGI episode? Thomas and the emergency cable. That feels like something out of Tank Engine Thomas again. Give or take a few ingredients. What's your ideal voice cast for the characters? I might talk about that in an episode, actually. Ideal cast, ideal narrator, stuff, something like that. Will you make or have you made any models of your takes on characters? Yeah, a couple. There's Thomas, Annie and Clarabelle, Percy, Toby, the eyes aren't very good here. Bulgy with a learning curve model face. Here's Trevor. By the way, brace yourselves for some placeholder faces. I know you can't handle those. Some of you can't handle those. Here's Donald. Here's Douglas. Here's some wagons. This is Condex. And this is Spats. And I showed you guys James body shell I got last year. I haven't touched that yet. Do you plan to include any OCs in the series? Some will argue I have, and they're half right, because like I keep saying, a continuation of where Season 5 left off would play out differently. But it won't make those fucking people any happier. Are there any characters you won't cover? Yeah, a couple. What do you think of AEG? I don't. If you were the one to write Thomas's first movie, what would you have it be like? I made a concept poster last year. Incidentally, I intended to edit a 3D printed face. I painted blue to make it look gray, but I couldn't make it look right, so fuck it, I just went with my style. It's something I think David Mitton would have liked to direct. Seems like a balls off the walls story, and it totally is, but it was inspired by something that really happened. A bunch of things that really happened, actually. What do you think of Tatmer? It's cancer. What's your favorite theme music from the show? It's close, but I'm gonna say Bill and Ben's theme. How do you choose the bases for these characters? Just information that crops up in the course of my research. That's virtually where every one of my decisions come from. Why did you decide to make all the UK tank engines a different type, changing some of the established cast? I first noticed, I was looking up information on the Wisbech and Upwell tram engines, and I found they had well tanks. And I thought, oh, Toby's a well tank. Wait a minute. Thomas is a side tank, Percy's a saddle tank, Toby's a well tank, Duck's a pannier tank. Oh, Oliver's another side tank. And oh, Bill and Ben are saddle tanks as well. And then I immediately thought of the other, like the tender engines. We got an American, a Pacific, a Mogul, a 10-wheeler. We got twin 6-coupleds. And with the diesel haulers, we got a diesel mechanical, a diesel electric, a diesel hydraulic. It's like you got a puzzle in front of you. There's some gaps, and there's some requisite pieces sitting on top. And to me, it would just be irresponsible to leave it that way just because a bunch of stationary objects grew up with it. How do you decide an engine's gender? I might make a video about that too, explaining my method of sexing various conveyances. If your J70 character is female, does that make her and Henrietta a lesbian couple? The extent of anthropomorphizing these vehicles is, they have sexes, but not sex drives. Are there any engines you would completely change? I kinda have. Oliver's a completely different engine, Bear's a completely different engine, Bill and Ben are completely different engines. What would you do with the Arsdale Railway? I haven't figured that out. I'm closer to figuring out my ideal Peel Godric fleet than I am the Arsdale fleet, or the Caldy Fell fleet. Was there any edit you couldn't do but really wanted to? Well, to be frank, I really did want to give Gordon a legit Raven underneath, but I didn't know how. So I said I was content with him having the upright cylinders and all that, but I'm not. But I don't know how the hell to pull that off. I still want him to be that specific one. City of Ripon with the A10 style boiler, but someday I want to try to figure out how to edit his chassis to look more like an A2's. Where would you suggest people start if they want to create their own Thomas stories, characters, or AUs? Any sources or viewpoints you could recommend? There's some books I could recommend if you're just starting out. If you want to write stories, or if you feel yourself growing out of Thomas and you want to graduate to the real thing. Buck Jumpers, Gobblers, and Clods by Jim Hill. In it you'll find stories that inspired Thomas's Train and The Runaway and Deep Freeze. Here's Red for Danger by Tom Rolt, where you'll find stories that inspired Percy Runs Away and Off the Rails and Thomas Percy and Old Slow Coach. And here's Toss of the Coin by David Maidment, where you'll find a number of stories that had inspired a number of Season 5 episodes. As far as viewpoints go, I'm not entirely sure. That's entirely up to the individual. How many engines are there on Sodor in your version? My goal is for Sir Topham-Hatt's main fleet to have 26 engines. In your version of Edward's exploit, how bad is the damage to Edward? Same as it is in the Railway series. Any other media besides Thomas you like? Nothing recent. I like mostly old shows. I like Phineas and Ferb, or I did up to a point. I liked My Little Pony Friendship is Magic up to a point. Virtually every show I like up to a point. Thomas I like up to a point. The Simpsons I like up to a point. As far as entire series, I like The Trapdoor, Bertha, It Ain't Half Hot Mom. Thoughts on Phineas and Ferb returning for another season? I stopped watching new episodes of Phineas and Ferb somewhere toward the end of Season 3 and beginning of Season 4, so I'm indifferent. What got you into Thomas? I've been watching Thomas for as long as I can remember. I had a babysitter who I think was right from Liverpool. She'd been showing me Thomas videos since I was born. Will you ever redo an edit? I kind of have, because while I was working on Bill and Ben, I realized I forgot to recolor the fronts of the cylinders on various characters, so I've gone back and done that with Percy and Gordon and Skarloey, and I made sure to do that with every character with outside cylinders from then on. What's the general timeline in your ideal version of the lore? As a rough guide, my the first story, Thomas and Gordon, takes place in 1961. What program do you use to edit the characters? Photoshop. There's none of that AI shit in here. How would railway operations work in MLP? I like to imagine they have kind of a Midland Railway style system. A big fleet of small engines to haul light loads frequently. Frequently. How many Topham Hats are in your AU? Just one. Opinions on seasons 1 to 5 of Thomas? If I could sum each of them up in one word, I'd say Season 1 is raw. Season 2 is rushed. Season 3 is clumsy. Season 4 is weird. Season 5 is innovative. Who are the top contenders for your favorite character? I think my top 2 right now are Sir Handel and Trevor. At the moment I'm on a Howard Laurie's kick though. Favorite stories from the Railway series, TV series, and CGI series? I talked about my favorite CGI episode. Favorite from the TV series would be Thomas Goes Fishing and Wrong Road. From the Railway series, I'd say Bulgy and Bullseyes. Are there any sentient cranes in your AU? Yep, I haven't quite figured out what I want to do with my my ideal breakdown cranes. There's things I want to do with the breakdown crane, but I haven't quite figured out how they look yet. Any different bases for generic rolling stock like wagons or express coaches? Not really. What's your favorite engine class? The Great Western Manor. How would you rewrite Blubba? Well, if the series had been handled competently for that long, it would have been the next logical step for Thomas to travel around the world, but I think the key is to have him travel to a different country every season at a point. Episode 100 had an adaptation of the Fat Controller's engines where they went to London. Ideally, I'm thinking episode 2 and around it would have been an adaptation of Thomas and the Great Railway Show where he goes to York. And maybe after that, every subsequent season, he goes to a different country. As it stands, episode 200 was in season 8, so maybe in season 9. He goes to America. In season 10 he goes to Japan. In season 11 he goes to South Africa or something. And I like to imagine he goes somewhere expecting to meet a bunch of foreign engines, and then he meets a bunch of engines built in like Manchester and Glasgow and Stafford. I like to think of that as like a culture shock. Why do you call season 6 and 7 the rebrand or the pseudo-classics? Officially the franchise was rebranded after the production of season 5 ended. You may have noticed that in some later season 5 home media releases the logo changed from Thomas the Tank Engine and Friends, which told you everything you need to know, to Thomas and Friends, downplaying the fact that he's a railway engine. And it just so happened in the new millennium the franchise shit the bus. It is entirely true that season 6 and 7 were directed by David Mitton and scored by Mike O'Donnell and Junior Campbell. But what good is that when the stories and production values are terrible? Season 3 came close to being crappy too. It was really clumsily executed, but at the same time, it was starting to find its look and sound. I think sound-wise, music and sound effects-wise, Season 3 was the peak of the show. Whereas in Season 6, not only was the execution very clumsy, but the show completely lost its look and sound. And by the time we get to Season 7, I can't detect a pulse in anything I'm witnessing. It's just so listless. Once the business said they wanted a new season every year, the series was doomed. What company should take Thomas out of Mattel's hands and make it good again? Not long ago, it was said that Flying Scotsman can no longer have a future in private hands. Similarly, I would say at this point, the entertainment business can't handle Thomas, and hasn't been able to for decades. I'd love to say it's in our hands now, but like I keep saying, we've got so many purists and nostalgics. Project Tiger Moth is what I'd call a good start, but it's just copying a style. For a lot of people, the name of the game is trying to recreate their childhoods. For me, the name of the game is trying to give an impression of what I would have liked my childhood to have evolved into. It's that approach I plan to take when I make the transition to CGI on DeviantArt.